Hi, this is going to be the second video in our Java for Android Developers series. And if you haven't watched the introduction, please do so first, as that's exactly where I'm laying off. At the end of that video, I ran an app that was self-populated by Android Studio, and I ran it on an emulator. But to really understand how that all happened, how that all works, we need to go a little bit deeper into the actual structure of an Android app. So over here on the left-hand column of Android Studio is our um, file navigator. So the real files that we really need to be concerned are in Android Studio alone is this build.gradle file. If you're using Eclipse as um, your IDE, you won't need to know about this because it's actually not required for Eclipse yet. But Android Studio and JetBrains, JetBrains, which is what Android Studio is based off, uses this build.gradle file. And what this file has is this language is actually called Groovy. Um, it's basically the meat and potatoes of how to compile the app. This has our information as what our app's name is. So this is the namespace of our app. The namespace usually goes in a reverse nomenclature. So the app is Hello World. I'm the developer Ruffles, and com would be like the website. So if you were to use this as a website, it would be www.helloworld.ruffles.com. But it's not really a website. That's just it's reverse nomenclature. That's just how the names that application IDs go. The Min SDK version. Now this will be an actual number for every version of Android except for the newest version, which is L. So L, it goes into a string, which is actually a text. So this thing that's in parentheses is text. That would be considered a string. And these that don't have parentheses around them are considered integers. I'll go over the basic or primitive data types in a future video. But just know that this is going to be what version of Android we're targeting, and you can find out the versions of Android that you want to target by clicking on this icon here, which is the SDK manager, which I introduced you to how to get to it from a different screen in the first video. But as you can see here, the API levels, that corresponds to an actual version of Android. So if you see in the older versions, so this would be Gingerbread, is API level of 10. So if we wanted to target Gingerbread, which I don't recommend you doing, would be to change this to 10. Now, the reason why I don't recommend you doing that is because even on a new device, you're going to have the old style icons and dialog boxes and all that stuff, and it'll look like you haven't updated your app because you really haven't. So instead, use the Min SDK version as if you want to target an older, if you want to be able to run your device on an older platform. This Min SDK allows you to run an app on a device prior than what you actually are intended to run it on. Now, keep in mind every single time that there's an update to Android, there's a lot of APIs that are changed. For example, in the latest version, Android L, that was announced at Google I/O 2014, there was 5,000 different changes or additions to Android APIs. Now, there are some things that obviously just will not work on an older device. An example would be Bluetooth 4.0 LT. If you're going to be making a Bluetooth app that requires Bluetooth 4.0 LT, some devices had that prior to Jelly Bean. For example, My device that I use on a daily basis is a Note 2. It was originally released with gingerbread, or not gingerbread, sorry, jelly beans. But Android itself didn't get official support until Android 4.3, not Android 4.1. So my device, which originally came with 4.1, still had it functional, but you had to use Samsung's APIs. So if you're going to make a Bluetooth 4.0 app, you might want to just target 4.3 and above, or use that as your minimum SDK version, because there are no gingerbread devices with Bluetooth 4.0 that work. So don't even bother doing that. So know the device that you're targeting, know the device that you're going to be using, or what type of app you're going to be making, because that'll be very important with this, how this all compiles and how it's going to look. So if I change this to target version of L and compile SDK version of Android L, we can change the look of the app now. Because before this, what wasn't available was the ability to use material design. And the whole purpose of this lecture is I kind of want to be ahead of the curve, want to teach you good practices and good design before we go as we go into the nitty-gritty Java. So for this app, we're changing this version that we're targeting and compiling so that we can use the new material design protocols. So this is the first required file, and it's automatically generated for you. So you're going to want to make these minor additions to this app, and note that this will change once this becomes official. These will be changed to integers, but Google hasn't made that change official yet. So the way that you access it is by using the string instead of an integer for both the compile SDK version and the target SDK version. All right, I'll go into, as we use support libraries, I'll go into how to add those here. But for this basic app, we don't really need it today. The next thing we need to go into is our source folder. Now, Android Studio splits up your Java classes with your resource classes. Now, another language you'll have to know for Android development is XML. And there's two files that you're going to need to know XML for. Your layout files, which are the overall design of the app. As you can see, Android Studio also allows us to have this preview of what we're doing as we do it. Now, if you honestly didn't want to learn how to do this, you can use the design tab on the bottom and drag and drop to make your app look the way you want it. However, I don't recommend that, because yes, it'll look fine here, but you're still going to have to know all the stuff over here so that it looks fine on multiple devices. So if you go into the text view, which forces you to learn XML, you can then get an overall feeling now of how this all works. Now, the XML is actually a database language, but it's very simple to pick up. If you know HTML, you know XML pretty much already. The way that this works is you have parents and children's. So this parent here is the relative layout. It's a type of layout where if we want multiple items on this, we need to reference where they need to be to other items that are inside the same layout. Now, in contrast, a linear layout will have everything stacked up on top of each other if you select the orientation of vertical, or next to each other, as in left right, right, right if you select horizontal as your orientation. So the two main layouts that you're going to use are relative and linear. So this basically incorporates the entire screen. These dimensions here, padding, are referenced elsewhere in this values folder. But if you click on them, you can actually find out exactly where they are. In the values, if you select values, there's a dimensions XML, which is dimensions. Now this allows you to change the dimensions depending on which device or version of Android or whatever, without actually having to rewrite the entire layout over and over again. You know, that's a nice feature. Another thing we can do over here is we can preview it on different devices. So right now it's previewed on a Nexus 4. We want to see what it looks like on a Nexus 5. Boom, it changes the resolution to look what it would look like on a Nexus 5. Next thing we can change to see what it looks like on a tablet. So let's do Nexus 10. One thing to note, if you have just one layout folder, it's going to use the default orientation for that device as how it's going to look. So on a 10-inch tablet, the default orientation is actually in landscape mode, but on phones, it's going to be portrait mode. And on a Nexus 7, it's also going to be portrait mode. See? So this is the default orientation for these devices. Now you can change the way something looks by creating a different folder for different orientation or version of Android. The way to do that is you actually click on this resource folder up here. We'll create a new resource directory, and that brings up this nice user interface for either picking whatever version of Android we want to target or whatever orientation we want to target. So let's say we want to make the same thing in a landscape orientation. So we'll do that, and then we'll pick layout, and then we need to select from here landscape. So now we have a folder that we can copy this in and paste it. And we want to keep the nomenclature the same, but let's say we want to change this text. So I'm in landscape. When we run this on an actual device, in landscape it'll have the text say I'm in landscape mode, and if it's in portrait mode, it'll just say hello world. And that's nice because we can change what we want with the layout without actually having to do any Java code to do so. Now, for most situations, you're going to want to incorporate something different, and you're going to have to do some Java code to do that. But I'll go into that in future classes. Now, the next type of so like I said before, this is a parent. This is the child of that parent. So if I have this is going to be inside of that. However, I can also create other layouts if I wanted to. Let's say this relative layout, I wanted a linear layout because I want things to be stacked on top of each other, but not for the entire view. I can put in layouts inside of layouts and then have different children for that. That's how XML works, is that this view here, this text view, only corresponds to this relative layout. It doesn't correspond to anything else unless I tell it to be part of that, or unless I want to reference it for this relative layout. Let's say I want it to be next to another view that, let's say we add another text view. The two required things for any view is the width and the height. You need to tell Android how big you want it. However, if you don't know how big of a space you need, you can do something like wrap content. That means that the view will change in size depending on how big it needs to be. So we'll do wrap content and wrap content. What this means is that right now it's zero size. There's no, it's not taking up any space because the content that this view has is 0. There's nothing to it. So let's give it some size. We'll give it some content. So we'll put in some, let's do the app name. Now, as you can see, this text, let's see if I can zoom in. This text is on top of other text. Obviously, you don't want that. But we can't tell it to be below this yet because nothing's named. So another thing you're going to want to do for just about everything is give it an ID. And then the structure for that is you say Android :ID equals @+ID, and then we'll say text1, and we'll copy this. We'll paste it here, and we'll call this, sorry, you don't want that. We'll call this text2. Now it's still on top of it because we haven't told it where to be. So we need to tell it to be below. So we can say Android layout below, and then we need to give the ID. So fortunately, Android Studio is pretty smart. It'll pull up the other views for you. So we want it to be below text1. So now you can see it's now on top of each other. And if you click on this, you can see that the height and the width are only exactly as what's needed to be, and that's because we selected wrap content. Now in contrast, we can also, let's say if we wanted to take up the entire device's height or width, we can say match parent. Now that's only as big as the parent layout lets it be. So you can see here we have some padding. The padding on the left is 64 density specific pixels, and on the right is 64 density specific pixels. So that's why even though we told it to take up the entire width of the device, there's 64 pixels here that that the layout is not letting it take up. So if we were to take out this left and right padding, you can see that now it takes up the full width of the device. So this is a pretty easy concept. Obviously, I'll go over more on layouts in the future, but there's another file we need to discuss that's written in XML as well. Now that's the manifest file. This is where the meat and potatoes for if your app requires certain permissions that we have to notify the user, let's say access the internet, we need to incorporate it in this file here. So we need to tell, and basically at compile, when you upload your app to the store, it reads this file here to find out what your app needs the device to do. And so we can say uses permission. Let's say android.permission.access internet, or sorry, internet. And we need to close off everything we start. So this is an opening block here, and then to close it off, if there's no children, you can just put this slash, and then I guess I forgot what type of caret that is, like a greater than less than sign. You want it all inside the two signs. As you can see, if it has children, like the application here has children, you leave it open, kinda. So you don't use the forward slash. You just use that, and then to close it, you need to put it again. Oh, sorry, down here for the application. Put it again on the bottom with the forward slash and then the name of it, and that closes off the block and lets you know that you have children. So the children are going to be, you have one actual child, which is the activity, which also has children itself for the intent filters. Now, what this intent filter does is this lets the device know that when we launch this application, we want to launch this activity. I haven't gone over activities yet, but I will in just a little bit, because that's the last file we need to discuss for the structure of an Android app. But every app needs to have at least one activity to run. So this one's already created for us as my activity. Every activity that your app needs to be referenced here. So if we had a second activity, we need to put it below here. It doesn't have to be the launcher activity, obviously, but it does need to be referenced. If we try to access that activity and don't tell the manifest that it exists, your app will crash. It'll tell you down here in the logcat why it crashed, but it will. You know, it's because you haven't referenced it. These little bits here for your application icon, it's stored in a folder here in the resources. IC Launcher, the default one is just a little bug droid with a square inside, with a cube inside of them. You would change that for your app that you're uploading to the store, and then reference it here. Okay, so that's pretty much all I need to discuss at this moment for XML. We'll go into this when we're discussing layouts, and as we make apps that need permissions and different changes, we'll go into this manifest file and make changes there. But now the whole meat and potatoes of this course is really going to circle around Java, and that's here in your activities. So just every Java folder is going to have essentially a class or an interface. For the most part, we're going to just be doing classes for this class. So you need to give it a name. So this one, the name is my activity. And then you need to tell the compiler what type of file it's going to be. So in this case, it's going to be an activity file, or an activity class. So you need to extend activity. In order for this to work as well, and for the compiler to know required methods for that, you need to import it. Import activity. Now this is already done for you for this file type, but if I were to make a new activity, let's make a new one. You can see I haven't, it's not imported, so it doesn't know what methods are required for this class. So to import it, hit down the Alt button and enter, and then import class. Now we've imported Android app activity. Now we don't really need this file now, so we'll get rid of it. Refactor, or we'll just do delete. Okay. So next thing we need to know is what type of methods we need to call in activity. And one of them that you need to definitely call every time is this onCreate method. Now the onCreate method refers to a specific point in the life cycle of your app. So your app is launched, it then selects which activity it needs to launch first. So in this case, it's our only activity, my activity. So then it needs to create it. So in the onCreate method, so once the device needs to know, it needs to, create your activity, you need to specify, in this case, what we need to make the app look like. So that's what this set content view is specific to activities, and it refers to a layout XML file. As you can see, set content view r.layout.activity_my. So anything that we're referencing our own files start with R. If we are referencing just a general Android file for use that each device will already have on it, we'll start it with android.r and then whatever type of file it is. So let's say we wanted to use a system icon. We can do android.r.drawable. Whatever our icon's name is in the system, or we can use our own drawables that we provide for the app, which is what we're going to end up doing every time, because believe it or not, between devices it'll have different icons for those reference drawables, especially when you talk about different versions of Android. Prior to Ice Cream Sandwich, the companies that made the device could use whatever file they wanted. After Ice Cream Sandwich, they still have those files, but they're also required to use the standard Android icons as well. So if you target Android, Ice Cream Sandwich, or newer, you know you're referencing those specific icons. But rule of thumb, don't do it. Just put in your own drawables, just in case some manufacturer totally ignored Google in that in the guidelines. So these other methods that we are referring to here, and I'll discuss what a method is in a little bit, just refer to the options. When we created our app, we have a little ... in the top right corner. Those are our options menu. One is created for you by default, and it's referencing an XML file as well, and that's in this menu folder here. So we are inflating that layout as far as it's basically a mini layout just for the menu items. And then we need to say, well, when we select the menu item, what are we going to do? And that's all this code here. It doesn't do anything. It just returns true. The app doesn't crash, doesn't do anything. If we wanted to have it do something, we would put that code right in there. So this is the basic structure of an Android app. You need an activity, a layout, the Android manifest, which is created for you, and the build.gradle file, which is also created for you. You just need to make changes as you go along, as you start making your app. Okay, and I hope this video was useful to you. In the next video, we'll go over actually discussing Java. We'll go over primitive data types, because they're going to be very useful to you when you need to reference or save data, or make something conditional. Those are things that every app is going to be required to use, that's going to be useful. So we'll talk about primitive data types next. All right, have a good day.